So yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed the 2x4s that came off of there. It took what, 10 minutes to mill up that log? And those what?
She's really enjoying it.
and those 2x4s, you know, are worth, you know, oak, nice full cut oak 2x4s like that, probably worth what, $8 a piece. Somebody that knows anything about lumber. And we took 8 of them out of there. That's 8 times 8, $64. Took about 10 minutes. So we took that log that would be worth about $10 at the sawmill and turned it into 64 in 10 minutes, and a machine that is a one-time expenditure. You can buy this machine right now today for about $7,000. So, you know, when you think about what that does, it's incredibly liberating. Projects that would otherwise be way too expensive or difficult to imagine suddenly become doable with this. You know, a pavilion. I mean, you know, those 20-foot long, 12-inch roof trusses there. All of those trusses, all those rafters, came out of 2 poplar logs. Now, they were big logs. But, you know, it's amazing the amount of volume that you can get out of something. It's just, it adds up real fast. And it makes a project like that, like, you know, like the brooder house, like a shade mobile, a gobbledygook, a corral, a gate, a house, a sales building, all these things that when, you know, you look at them and you just see tens of thousands of dollars in lumber and materials. Suddenly, oh, we can do that. We can get a hay wagon chassis for $200 at an auction, put on a little bit of lumber, make a new deck, and suddenly that hay wagon's worth $600. You know, so there are a lot of applications here. I've come to the conclusion that a sawmill like this is as valuable as a front end loader. And a lot of farmers can't conceive farming without a front end loader. Well, when you talk about $7,000 for this, there's a lot of things that farmers spend $7,000 on that don't yield the kind of versatility and opportunity that this does. So I'm a big believer in on-farm mills. They're not that expensive, and they really put you in the driver's seat on a lot of projects that otherwise would be very daunting. You can mill. You know, we've done custom milling for people around here. There's a lot of German siding. German siding is 5/8 by 7 inches. Why 5/8 by 7 inches? I have no idea. But that's what it's cut. Well, you can't go to Lowe's and buy 5/8 by 7 inches poplar boards, right? But you can come here, and we can custom mill that. We had a neighbor that wanted to take some. He had a field with some 6 and 7 inch cedar trees, and he wanted to make a bathroom, bathtub lined with cedar. And so he came to us with these little logs, and we put them on here and worked them up. And he now has, you know, cut them half inch thick, 3 inches wide. Now has this beautiful, you know, cedar bathroom around his bathtub. So, you know, there's a lot of uses for the machine. If we do custom milling for somebody like that, like a project like that, we normally charge about $40 an hour. Just you bring your log and we custom mill it. Now, that's illegal, but we do it anyway.
Why would that be illegal?
Because sawmills are illegal in agricultural zones. We're zoned agricultural, and sawmills are illegal here because that's manufacturing. So I got wind of the zoning when they were doing the hearings on the zoning ordinance. Went down there. I was the only one, you know, from the public attending the zoning hearing, and I got them to exclude logs from your own property. So at least we were legal to mill logs from our own property. But if a neighbor happens to cut a tree big enough to mill, wants to bring it down and wants me to mill him a fireplace mantle or something out of it, it's illegal for me to do it. I do it anyway. But I mean, the very idea that a sawmill is an incompatible use with agricultural zoning is just, I just can't even find words. And I usually find words for things. So it used to be that literally every 5 miles here there was a sawmill. You know, just communities had sawmills scattered all around. Now they're all gone. And what do farmers do? They go buy their lumber at Lowe's and Home Depot, like all the people in the city. Meanwhile, you know, the forests are worthless. They graze the cows through them and don't do any forest stewardship because the forest isn't worth anything, because it's only worth $10 an acre, like I already explained, you know, from the commercial milling project. This way, we can actually take this stuff, turn it into value, and selling now an acre instead of just returning, you know, $10 or a once a lifetime yield of $500. Now we can actually go in and value add it, and that acre suddenly becomes worth $5,000 to $10,000 as lumber and firewood. Now suddenly, if you have 50 acres, you can actually make a living on it. One of the nicest stories that I ever saw was a guy in Vermont that had an 18-acre woodlot. That's all he owned, was 18 acres of woods. And he made a white-collar salary off of 18 acres of woods. For many, many years, he was finally voted Vermont Tree Farmer of the Year. Well, what he had was a woodworking shop. So everything that he could value add, if he cut a little cherry sapling that I would cut up into firewood, he took those pieces, turned them on his wood lathe, and sold them at craft fairs for $80, you know, customized rolling pins. Okay, and you know, for an extra $10, he'll even engrave your name on it. You know, and he took. I tried to do some of this. I just don't have any craft. I just don't have any artistic ability. Totally functional. But he cut all the stumps about this high, and he'd go down with a chainsaw and cut it right on the ground level. Paint the 2-inch with wax so they dry real slowly and not crack. And then when you turn it upside down, you know how a tree trunk flares at the ground level, so the flare is up. He'd put legs in it, sell it as a bench for $100. So all of his stumps, he got $100 for all of his stumps, selling them as benches, as stools. And of course, you know, every one of them's different. It's unique in the world. There's never another stool exactly like that. And of course, you know, some of them have a nice little tip that comes out, a little flare. You know, they have all these sorts of little things. So, you know, there's a lot of things you can do to value add a woodlot, and I just think that the commercialization of the lumber industry has really taken a lot of that appreciation of wood, the appreciation of forestry management, and the fact that it can actually yield a pretty good income out of the equation.
How about your vertical cuts? How do you do that? How do you make something that's only 10 feet long or 8 feet long? Like on your 2x4s, you know, like these are as long as, you know, however the tree was, but
no, yeah. It's they're cut 8. We cut logs 8, 12, and 16.
Okay.
So, you know, we used to cut logs every 2 feet. That's commercial. 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Okay. But what we found was that it just made inventorying hard to keep the stacks different. And this is the 8s and the, you know, now you've got 2 more piles. You know, you've got 10s and 14s. Give you 2 more piles to try to keep straight, keep where the logs are and all that. And so I finally just quit and went to 8s, 12s, and 16s. And so if we want a 10-foot, we just cut 2 feet off of it. The shortest we can mill, as long as you can get a piece between these two, you know, between here, you can mill it. So you can mill some pretty short stuff, and we can mill up to 24 feet. All these fence posts right here, these are all locust fence posts. I milled all those on here.
Is this table,
and of course, they're short. They're just little electric fence posts, so they're short. They're only 5 feet, but They mill right up, just real well.
Table's part of the 7,000, or do you have to build?
Yeah, no, that's 7,000 altogether, yeah. And of course, it was originally bought portable. It had an axle here, and it was only 16 feet. The actual deck comes to right here. That's 16 feet right here. But we've added the 8-foot section so we could cut much longer rafters for things. But anyway, I mean, if you're in Douglas fir country, you might want to add another 16 feet so you can cut a 30-foot something or other. But I mean, this deck, I mean, you can just add pieces out here, pretty much for infinity if you want to. But we thought, like so many, that we would use it as a portable mill. But the truth is that it's difficult to set it up portable. You have to find just the right spot. You're up here in the mountain or whatever. You got to find just the right spot where no stump and the ground can only be so uneven. I mean, you can't set it on a hill. You got to have an approach that works for the tractor to get the log on. And by the time you clear off, a spot big enough that works, that's flat enough that works, and then get the deck really leveled up, and you're on the dirt, and so these feet, you put a big log on there, and one edge of it happens to hit extra hard on here. Well, then that foot drops a little bit in the ground, and I mean, it doesn't take much to show up some wavy wood. I mean, if this thing is off by a 1/16 of an inch, it looks like a mile when you look at the board. Okay, so it's pretty meticulous. And what we found was that it was a lot easier for us to set it up permanently and bring the logs to it rather than trying to haul it around the country and set it up. So we finally poured the concrete pad, bolted it down, so then there's bolts going into anchors in the concrete so it can't wiggle or move around. And now it cuts real true. I never have to turn jacks or worry about rotting little boards I have underneath it or any of that kind of stuff. And it's real easy to keep the little pad clean. You can sweep it out, fork it out, whatever, and it just makes it real handy. The again, big picture, just to wrap your head around big picture stuff. 80 years ago, if you wanted to mill boards with these big stationary frick mills, the kerf, that's the amount of wood that the blade takes, was 1/4 of an inch. So every 4 cuts, you lost 1 inch of wood. All right. So that's why 80 years ago, if you wanted small dimension stuff like lath or something, you used a froe. You got like a 4-foot piece of white oak, and you'd have a froe, and you'd pound it in and move it sideways, and you'd make your little split your little lath pieces. Why? Because if you made lath, 60% of your wood ended up in the sawdust pile. Okay, it's too valuable, especially in the time before chainsaws, to be throwing away that much wood. So, now with this little kerf being just 1/10 of an inch, we can cut 1/2 inch by 1 inch stuff, the kind of stuff that's on the bottom of Daniel's rabbit hairpins. And we can cut all day and we still don't have really any sawdust because there's just no sawdust. So suddenly now we can actually make small dimension tinker toy stuff so that we can build things light enough to actually be portable. 80 years ago, you couldn't build portable farm infrastructure like shade mobiles and things like that because you couldn't afford to mill lumber that small. That's why people built in the early days. They built with log cabins. It wasn't because people were in love with log cabins. It was because it was too difficult to mill lumber. So everything had to be huge, as opposed to the Indians, which used all small dimension lumber. But the reason Europeans used big dimension was because milling was very cumbersome and tedious. And when you're pit sawing, you don't want to make 1x4s. Okay? That's a lot of sawdust in somebody's face all day to make a 1x4, right? So you want to use large dimension lumber. Whereas now, with a simple little 20 horsepower engine, which you can get by with because now you're not having to move so much sawdust. I mean, one of the reasons that those big mills had to have a big 100 horsepower engine on them was because they had to remove so much wood as they cut. It took a lot of horsepower to remove all that wood. Here, we're only moving 1/10 of an inch, so you run it all day on a gallon of gas with a little Honda engine, and you're up and running. So it's this is really I mean, it's really a breakthrough. This is, you know, when you look, for me, when I look at innovative technology to democratize food and fiber, well, just to democratize food and fiber production and distribution, this is in my top 10 machines. This is one of them, okay? Because you don't have to build very much stuff to realize how expensive. And I think I mentioned it yesterday that since we have lumber, you know, we can go to, for example, a piece of land that's raw land that normally people would say, man, I can't do anything with this, there's nothing here. We can put something there. Cheap. Because we have the lumber. Okay? So something that gives us an unfair advantage of being able to utilize a piece of otherwise underutilized land with infrastructure, with things that are on it. Other questions? Yes.
Did you have to make that extension yourself, or was it?
No. We bought it from the same guy.
Oh, okay.
This is a Turner mill built by Bill Turner up in New York. He was a race car mechanic, and he bought this little farm up in Oxford, New York, and said, I want to build my own house. Started looking around at bandsaw mills. He was real mechanical, and he said, you know, I think I could build one as well as any that I've seen. So he put his own head to it. This was one of his, actually, the deck was one of his first ones that he built. We've changed out the head on it once, and so it's a new head, old engine, but new head here, but the deck is our original. We've had it for, I don't know, 18 years, 17 years. Had it a long time, and it's always been out in the weather. This roof is brand new. We just got it up last week, so finally we've been wanting a roof over it forever. And now we can come out here on a rainy day or snowy day or something. This makes a real nice place to work. Now the next thing I want to do here, the next improvement here, will be a deck. So you come right up here and you put a deck out here, you know, with little standards standing up yay high, that you can then put half a dozen logs on, and you have a little a bridge here. You know, a piece that you can take up, and it just sits here. And when you want another log, you just roll it over and put it on. So you don't have to start the tractor every time you want a log on here. It's called, in the industry, they have a live deck, and it sits out here, and it has a conveyor on it that you can push a button, and the conveyor moves your logs forward. Well, we're not going to go to that thing. All we need is to be able to just roll the logs, you know, on it, roll the logs up. So that'll be kind of the next major development. Let me just say that kind of my take on the petroleum thing is that we were, as a planet, we were essentially gifted cheap energy right at a tipping point when our mechanical prowess and what we understood and knew from a technology innovation mechanical standpoint was right at the point where we could have taken that cheap energy and essentially remediated everything that we've damaged since the beginning of history. So I'm not opposed to using petroleum. What frustrates me is that we took this bonanza of available and cheap energy, and instead of building ponds up in the valleys of all the mountains and creating flood-proof, drought-proof Edens, and instead of creating high organic matter soils with water retentive capacity and incredible earthworm populations. Instead, we figured out how to build a food system in which it takes 14 calories of energy to get 1 calorie on your plate, and every morsel of food travels 1,500 miles to get there. So, you know, the tragedy of the human condition is not that we're lazy. We're not lazy. The tragedy is we're being extremely successful at the wrong things. That's the tragedy. So, we don't apologize for using petroleum as long as that drives a fundamentally carbon-centric program that actually builds the soil. If we use the petroleum that we have to actually change the economy over to a real-time solar carbon economy, you know, then it would have been a very strategically discovered and placed and used resource.